I'm hoping that in 2 years' time we don't need double headers.
Welcome to another episode of AFLW Inside Out. I'm Laura Spurway. I'm with Meg McDonald. Hello, Meg.
Hello, Laura.
I've been looking forward to this chat because we've got a very special guest for you in today's episode, Dee Madigan, who you might know from the Gruen. She's the Executive Creative Director and a founding partner of Campaign Edge. And one of the reasons that we wanted to get Dee on the podcast was to talk about the battle for the sports marketing dollar in Australia, which is very competitive. But obviously, there's been a massive story this week, Dee, in terms of what's unfolded with the Sydney Swans. And I thought we'd just ask your perspective on that quickly through your lens. So a lot of damage control. We've heard a lot about, we want to earn the trust back. We're sorry to our members, to our fans, to our staff, to our AFLW team. And we've heard also about how the corporates have been pretty supportive, which is interesting. Maybe that's just what they want to say publicly. But what are your observations about, from a branding point of view, how this has gone on?
Like most women, when I watched the news story and that said it's disappointing our players found themselves, and I just screamed at the TV. They didn't find themselves there. They put themselves there. As an AFL supporter, deeply, deeply disappointed, even though I know it's probably gone on for years. At least I think hopefully we live in a time where the women are more comfortable coming forward and making a complaint, and hopefully that changes things.
I think when we talk about communications, there's been a lot of critique, of course, about the events of the weekend, and that is ongoing and very, very serious. But then it was also about how it was reported on and the importance of communications at this time. And I think in this conversation, we'll have a conversation around public relations and PR and the importance of that. But I think it's important to say that it's not just about, yes, you did it right or yes, you did it wrong, but about the fact that how we report on violence against women and how we talk about violence against women either works to prevent it or to perpetuate it in the future because of the impact it has on culture. Can I ask, and I want to ask a follow-up question about AFLW, but how do you see in your role, in your job, and your many, many jobs, the power of sport to influence culture?
I think sport is one of the few things left today that isn't as divisive as some. It's one of the few things that bring people together. So it's one of the few areas where if you're talking about something that's happened in sport, you're not just speaking inside the bubble. And that's why it is so important that the language be better and not be passive about men finding themselves in situations, because that's not how domestic violence or any violence works. It's about people putting themselves in that situation and acting on it. And those are active verbs.
It's decisions.
It's decisions and it's actions, and that matters. And AFL or all sports are one of the few vehicles where we can still, I think, enact change in society, and that's why it's probably more important than almost any other field.
And an important part of enacting change in our sport is the inclusion of women and the celebration of AFLW. The Swans have a doubleheader this weekend. What work now goes into shifting the focus?
I don't think they should be trying to shift the focus, if that makes sense. I feel like, no, we don't just move on. Let's talk about it. I would like, something at the game that recognise it. I'd like something that the women do to say this isn't okay. That's what I would like. It's something where they can see that the fans are not okay with the behaviour.
Meg, I'll just ask you quickly before we move on, your reflections on this, because I was thinking about you and everyone that, we both know who plays W, used to play W. When something like this happens, it's difficult not to feel something about it. How have you been reflecting on it?
Yeah, and it's not just W players, it's women in this industry and women, as I've already said, in a society more broadly that values and places on a pedestal our sport and the people that play it. I think about not only the AFLW team at the Swans, but the women in the football department of that club more broadly. And I think the reality is that there would have been a variety of emotions in response, everything from real anger to fatigue. We've spoken about that a little bit, because to be a player in this industry, to be a woman in this industry, to be a gender diverse person in this industry is to have known disrespect and is to have known discrimination. And then to be more broadly a woman in this country is to know that we have an epidemic of violence against women and the stats on that. So I think that's where the fatigue comes in. And for a lot of people where the anger comes in, and I admire the veracity of that anger. if you're the W playing group, I think there would be an awful lot of exasperation and disappointment as well. And hope, and for some victim survivors, we won't know who, but when we know that 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual violence, then there will be people connected to that club who have a different experience off the back of it. So there is all that going on. And for the W playing group, I think some of the exasperation comes from the fact that we aspire to integration so heavily, and we aspire to having the privileges and the income and the celebration that the men's team have, and that we use the integration and the celebration of that to promote our game. And as we should, it's an enormous marker of progress. And that's why celebration, the doubleheader is a celebration. And I think about the doubleheader and I think hopefully in the last couple of hours, last 24 to 48 hours for the W playing group and for the Sydney Swans more broadly, it can shift to hopefully an excitement at the opportunity before those players to go and own a really big stadium and a really big space, because in that owning of that space, playing in those stadiums, being celebrated and supported, it works to prevent violence against women in the future and to change cultural norms that have us, those cultural norms make all of us, we're all in the soup. So we all go, what happens to their finals campaign? It's not unnatural to have that thought. It's just how you interrogate it beyond that and what you then choose to say. So I know you asked me for a small comment. There's
no,
all my
you got
thoughts.
lots to say.
Lots of
Nothing
thoughts.
wrong with that.
So I look forward to everyone attending the W game, to watching the W game, and to celebrating the women of that football club and of our code, and because we know how influential it is more broadly.
Also, they had a great game last weekend, the Swans.
Oh, and that's part of it. Like,
they had a great game.
we're going so well.
Yep. So
And
we'll get around them, and we'll be watching this weekend, and we really hope they do well after what's been a tough week. But thank you for your thoughts. You're always, she's got a brain on her, this one, Dee. Now, look, we'll go to what we're going to speak to you about more generally, and this came up because we're thinking about purely the competition in this country to attract sponsors. We are a small country, but we are a sporty country.
Yes.
There's a saturation of codes, both men's and women's, all fighting for this sponsorship dollar, and it seems like it's more competitive than ever, and everything's more expensive than it's ever been. So how competitive is the sports sponsorship market in Australia?
It's incredibly competitive, particularly as we are hopefully seeing a restriction of gambling sponsorship. And I know, clubs are panicking and that's money gone, but I still remember when Benson and Hedges used to sponsor the cricket, and it'll be the end of cricket if we have, cigarettes out of it, and it turned out not to be. Having said that, it does mean you have to think a little bit more outside the usual channels for where you get the sponsorship from, and particularly for women's sport. I think it's about category expansion, not substitution. I think that's it. It's maybe looking at, instead of 1 or 2 big ones, it's a sort of a broader selection of ones, so you're not as reliant on one. But the good news is there's so many institutions that are in such a world of pain when it comes to public perception that they're desperate for some sports boob washing.
I love this phrase. Explain what it is, just for people who don't know. I love this.
Let's ask Dee about sports washing, and then
No.
This iteration.
Sports boob washing.
So what we know with a lot of companies, they try to sort of what we'd call greenwashing, where they try to make themselves appear more environmentally conscious, and we'd call that greenwashing because sometimes it was a little bit of an astroturfed campaign. It wasn't reflected in their actual broader corporate sort of behaviour. Hopefully this isn't the case. But companies need a social licence to operate increasingly. They need to be seen to be doing good, and being seen to sponsor sports is a good thing, and being seen to sponsor women's sports, hence the boob washing, particularly good. And also I would say that for those companies, women's sport mightn't have the reach of men's sport at the moment, but I've seen with this week, it also doesn't have the risk. I mean, the women are generally better behaved than the men. That's not just in sport. But, so even though it mightn't, be quite at the coverage level, there might be a lot lower risk and a lot sort of better bang for their buck in terms of being seen to help out women's sport.
So how do you, because my mind goes to, you don't want to be seen, or we don't want to be like, oh, well, we're the charity case. No. Women's sport's the charity case. Let's help out women's sport because they need it, or we want to seem like we're do-gooders. So how do we kind of remove that perception from what you're saying and make sure the intentions are good and the messaging is good?
Then it's about finding the right sponsors who actually get something out of it besides just the do-gooder. And good corporate sponsorship should actually be trying to do that anyway. So there's a great one in Arsenal Women have a sponsorship by Purcell, which is Omo, basically, overseas. And it's a campaign about the double standards between mud stains, which are considered a badge of honour, and period stains, which are sort of read as shame. So it's a detergent brand that's kind of found this product truth that only exists in women's sport. So it's a really relevant sponsorship that most women would say, yay. So it works for them and it works for the sport as well. So it is finding those kind of synergies, I think. And look, it's tricky as well because the money, of course, if you're going away from probably alcohol and gambling and things like that, there's a temptation to go towards the beauty side, which I think is could be problematic both because you want your players to be really comfortable with the sponsorships. Otherwise, there's no point having sponsorships if your players aren't comfortable going out there and saying happy to be sponsored by them. So you want to be tricky that you're not taking a sponsor who is kind of some way contributing to women feeling like they have to spend more and do a body shame. Exactly that. So I think it's just that fine line of I'd be really making sure that the players themselves are very comfortable with that sponsorship, but equally there's a consumer angle to it. It has to be something that the supporters like as well. Like, weirdly enough, it reminded me when I was walking in here, the very first piece I ever got published in media was me having an absolute spray against the Sydney Swans. When they first started in Sydney, they had this marketing thing where they marketed to the female fans differently to the males and gave us beauty samples, and I was freaking furious. It was like, do not if I'm going to the AFL, it's because I love AFL.
So you turned up to go to a game and they
got a little
samples.
bag of beauty samples, but they didn't give the men that. They got something else that was to do with the sport, and I was so angry about being marketed to separately as a female fan of AFL that was the first piece I ever had published in the media.
What did they say? Did they contact you about it?
I don't. No, they didn't. This was pre-internet.
Pre-fame?
Yeah, it was pre-fame. Yeah, this is when the Swans were first sort of. It was probably it wasn't first in Sydney, but they'd only been in for maybe 5 or 6 years. So it was. It would have been the late 90s.
So interesting there when you speak about how it works for the players or for the people being portrayed across not only sport, but I'm interested in general, that tension sometimes between, yes, as you've spoken about, the sponsors that the players or the people within the sport are happy to be associated with. But furthermore, and what I've experienced is a real appetite for players to want to be portrayed as athletes, as gritty, as part of a contact sport. And yet that isn't always what will work to grow the sport from a family-friendly, all about the crowds point of view. How do you manage talent or the people that you're portraying and their understanding of how they're going to be portrayed?
Yeah, it is fascinating. I was looking at AFLW particularly. There are no, unlike, say, the Matildas and that, where you have some standout people who the public know, there doesn't tend to be yet, which is kind of interesting. And if the AFLW get it right, where women are really comfortable standing up saying this is a sponsorship I'm proud of because it sells the things I want to sell, then in a way, instead of just having a brand that's sort of sold in one place, it's sold every time that person's on social media and stuff like that. So that's really important. But equally, that commercial thing of what works with people. But I think people want, and this is a focus group of one, I think we want to see with women's sport that it is gritty and fighty and it's sport. That's what I go there to see. So there will be some glams and they will, sell themselves as glams, and that's fine as well if that's their personal.
That's the thing. We spoke about this, sorry to cut you off, we spoke about this on Monday, was that these players are all things. You've got 30 players per list. Women contain multitudes. Times 30 it can be multiple things at once.
Exactly that. And we shouldn't make them feel bad for not doing that either. But the sport itself, I remember my son, the first time he was watching AFL, a female team, and he would have been 8 or 9, and he's watching it. And I sort of said, oh, what do you notice about that? And he sort of started talking about the game. He didn't even notice they were women. And that's kind of, I liked that it was about sport first, which I think is probably, I mean, there's no point pretending women are male, nor do we want to. But I do think it should be sport first. And I think that's why we go to the game. And I think females play sport in a slightly different way than men that's kind of fluid and cool and great to watch. And I think the spectacle of sport has to be the number one thing.
The interesting thing that you've said there is, sport first, but the AFL, and this came out in our interview with Gil McLaughlin, and I think this comes out from the marketing strategy they've gone with this season, wants the women to have its own identity, or the AFLW to have its own identity as a league. So they're leaning into the differences, saying we are not the same, don't expect us to be the same. And I sent you the campaign, the Our Game, Our Rules, which rolled out at the start of the season. And I was curious because I wanted to get your read on it, your thoughts on, if that's what they want to do, is it?
We want our own episode of Gruen.
Yeah. I liked it because it had an attitude and not an apology. And sometimes women's sport feels, I don't know, slightly trying to be a little bit nice or a bit worthy, like we deserve to be there, which is kind of true. But I like the fact that wasn't doing that. It's about selling a game, not a cause, which I thought was nice. The hour is really important because all successful sports are about belonging, and I think that was kind of a nice way of doing that. And also, it wasn't comparing males to females, and also there was no chick marketing in it, and I have an aversion to chick marketing. It's like, oh, we haven't pinked, the sort of the corporate pink heel sort of. It wasn't any of that, and as a sports fan,
the crowd of women.
So how do you feel about the coral?
The coral.
The coral.
Oh, look, it's, I work in politics a lot, and there's always the same thing with female politicians about, I think it's one of those things where that's important for the players to feel comfortable with.
Yeah,
I don't think it sort of matters as much to the outside. It's close to pink, but, the other problem with sport is all the colours are taken.
Yes. So and that's not necessarily, that was a cheeky question.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily speaking to my opinion on the coral, because I think it came from originally and I think a very important part about the launch of the season was, I believe Gemma, who had created the brand of AFLW, came and presented to the playing group. That was a really important part of the process, and the reasoning behind the coral, et cetera, was explained and certainly made sense, but things change across. We're 10 years on now, so I think different iterations are important.
That is actually really true as well. And back then the kind of the pinkish thing was probably at least relevant to get media and that, whereas now it's, you feel it's hopefully not necessary, but...
Yeah. I was really interested in listening to lots of your work around, and this again, we're speaking to how we speak about our sport and how we grow our sport, was how negative information is processed and stored. Can you speak a little bit on that? Because we discuss feeling like we want to be positive all the time, but then introducing critique into the conversation as well. How does it work from a brain point of view?
So it's interesting. Brands always want to talk about, themselves positively, which I get. But the reality is that probably for survival reasons, humans are hardwired to notice negative information. Like if you're on your phone in the morning, you click on the bad stuff first. And we're hardwired to retain negative information, which is why there was the old management axiom, you give someone one piece of criticism for every 5 compliments, because of the way we retain the negative information.
Shit sandwich.
Yeah.
I wish the comment sections worked like that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Ratio.
No, never read the comment section. That is my sort of, if you wouldn't go to them for advice, do not care about their criticism is my one of my mantras. But it is how we operate. So, and also sometimes selling a problem, you have to sell a problem before you can sell a solution as well. And so that can be sometimes a clever way to get negative information out, so you can kind of hook people and then say, this is what we're doing about it, as long as you've got a solution there.
So the AFL was really ambitious at the start of the season, the W season, saying, we want AFLW to be in one of the top 5 sports, male or female, in this country, maybe over a decade. So it's not really like a firm time frame was given. How do you do that?
So the double header is a really interesting example of whether it's good or bad. And again, I'm split on that, because I get that sometimes you have to sort of drag people in a little bit and sort of you offer them something else, I guess, and they start watching it and realise they like it. But equally, when you're selling sports rights to something, you have to be able to prove that you got the crowds in on your own. And so, it's I'm hoping that in 2 years' time we don't need double headers. is kind of the way to do it. It has to be.
So this is like a stepping stone.
Yeah. But in itself, there are some problems possibly just because it kind of almost admits that we are
same.
Or no, we're
you
need it.
Sorry.
Yes, we're on the coattails a little bit, which is probably it's the corporate reality.
Yeah.
But it also mightn't send the best message, so it's a really tricky one on that. But equally, it's just about getting bums on seats.
Can you speak to us then about this the psychology, I suppose, of scarcity and that look when we are deciding what venues to play at and how to shoot something, how the decision to have a sold-out stadium that you can't get a ticket to compares to we're going to play it, for example, at the SCG?
Yeah. You see this with music stars all the time, where all of a sudden they'll release something that says, we've decided to change the look and feel and go for more intimate venues. It's like, because you didn't sell out your other ones. But there is nothing worse than a stadium with bugger all people in them, having gone to some NRL games, and they get like 5,000 people there.
It's
and
totally
you're like,
different.
Oh my God, this would be mortifying if it was an AFL sort of thing. I think you don't want to make it impossible, but you want to make it feel special that you got in there as well. And also driving membership is the way to do that as well, because when people have a ticket, they want to go. Like, I remember when AFL Swans moved to Sydney, and I did the naughty thing you're not supposed to do with AFL, which is change teams. But the reason was they were struggling financially, and a whole group of about 100 expats made the decision that if they were going to survive, we had to put our money where our mouth is and all become members. And for like 10 years going to a game and seeing the same people was such a lovely feeling. Then I had kids and realised
I thought you were going to say, and then I went to the Giants. And...
No. I can't. Like a third swap would be awful. But I think it's about creating I think it would be about getting as many members, driving your membership rather than just your one-offs, and then it starts creating a really lovely atmosphere as well. But you want to make sure the members go to the games as well. You don't
because they're different things, aren't they? It's like I can sign up for my membership, but I might not go. And they've been big on, the Swans have been really big on the one club approach, and that's why this week is so disappointing for so many people. But how do you build that membership when it comes to W? Because I think what we're seeing, and this comes from your question before about the athletes wanting to be recognised as athletes, they're starting to kind of lean into the individuals, some of the personalities, maybe some of the glamours that exist in AFLW. And I think the thought process is what they may do on social media has a bigger impact than putting game highlights on social media.
100%. Also, there's in branding, we know that people are 80% more likely to buy something at a friend's recommendation than from the brand itself. And it kind of works the same. If people relate to a player and someone they see online and they feel like they kind of know them, and that player says to come here.
What I'm interested in is how do you bridge generations, from the generation playing the game to the generation on social media to the generation that sort of makes up the most of sports traditional media, to the multitude of generations that consume the game.
If you're saying sort of the same thing but to different target audiences, you tend to fail a little bit. I think what is good now is just the amount of females playing AFL at junior level. So that's almost your feeder thing. But there is a period, I think, with females in particular where and anyone who's got teenage girls knows this, where you'll lose them for a couple of years, and it's about making sure they kind of stay connected to the games as well. So we've got that from the bottom, and I think you've got a lot of older feminists who are like supporting it just because it's what we do, and it's probably also the time poor women in the middle who are dealing with having to work a job and do most of the childcare even though they shouldn't have to, and all the other things as well. It's how do you keep them involved, and it's just I think thinking creatively. How can you, keep them involved in a way that's not going to take up a lot of their time? And maybe it is online, breaking down tiny little things that happen and pushing out like really sort of 10-second videos of cool stuff that happens on the field, like we do with TV shows now, like where you can...
Little clips of segments
and things, just that keeps them connected and doesn't cost the league much money. And I think just get some tide over until they can get back to, watching it again.
So what are the most effective or how would you be marketing AFLW? If you had an unlimited budget, let's say they threw a bunch of money at you.
I would send me on a world trip to look at how other women's sports is doing it well.
We'll come.
Okay. How would I market it? I would be really careful about not marketing it to chick sort of, that's the bit that I think, again, focus group of one, the bit that can really annoy females, like you're somehow talking down to them or can only reach them through traditional sort of ways of doing it, like look how pretty we are sort of stuff. I think a little bit of competition isn't bad between male and female stuff. I think if women can sort of show that they're doing it a bit faster or better and stuff, I think is, we don't want to be comparing men to women, but if it's, stuff that it's at least as good could be good. I think it's about, I think with sports and women's sports particularly, you have to put the sport first. This is about great sport, but also a really great environment. Like everyone I know who goes to watch women's sport talks about how it feels. And like I'm going to talk Taylor Swift. I know Meg's not a fan. Outrageous. She's not a fan of Taylor Swift.
Exposed.
Yeah. She's not a fan either, so that's just me being mean.
I wasn't a big enough fan to make sure I got a ticket, but I was a big enough fan to be there that weekend being like, I wish I had a ticket. That's right. That's where I am.
Yeah, fair. But everyone talked about the feeling of the concert and amongst the women as well.
And that's why I was like, I wish I was there.
Yeah, and it was amazing. But I do think there is something about everyone who's going to the games, and it actually doesn't matter whether it's AFL or soccer or, they talk about the feeling, and that's kind of what brands are. Like people talk about brands in terms of logos and strap lines and that, and it's not what you say about yourself, it's how people feel, and that's how people feel. So I would also be encouraging the fans who go to the game to push out their own content as well, so they become your own content creators, and that's really powerful.
This was like Tennis Australia's strategy 101 with the Australian Open this year, was all the influencers in the crowd, right?
Yeah.
Putting all the influencers in the crowd because they were trying to get over that perception that tennis was kind of like that, maybe the genteel.
Quiet, please.
Yeah. That
So
whole
they put
thing.
a whole lot of people going, I'm obsessed with the whatever
in the
it is.
crowd.
Yeah,
but it's that kind of thing,
Yeah,
I
but I
suppose.
think more real. Like I feel like you don't want to go into that. Firstly, you have to be careful now. If you are paying someone to do something, they have to disclose it in the post.
Yep.
So but it has to, I think, feel not curated. Like I think that's that's the sport and the grittiness and that. You want the crowds to be doing their own stuff, not just influencers, but just normal people pushing out stuff, but making sure you've got your hashtags and stuff there, or having some fun at the game that adds to the feeling of it, whether it's competitions while you're waiting. I don't know. You really think about what can we do to up the feeling that doesn't take away from the sport.
So if you're a W fan and you're going to a game and you feel invested enough in the sport that you want it to do well and you want to contribute to it doing well, how can you do that?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to the average person who's going along, who's, doesn't have your expertise or isn't an influencer about what they could do in a game?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So maybe in the booklet, or do they still do the footy record?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something in that gives them some lines to write. Like sometimes when you just tell people something they can post, or make it where they can do something a little bit creative, like where they can maybe there's a QR code that they can scan on their phone, and it gives them a selection of shots from the game that they can then put onto their social media. I think making it as easy as possible, so because people get a bit nervous because they're putting their own social cachet behind it. If you can make it a little bit easier for them, and also make sure then you're controlling the content a little bit by giving it to them, I think there's some really good ways to do that. And if each person, even if they've only got 30 friends each, you can really expand it that way, and just be honest, say, hey, we really want as many people to enjoy this as possible, and you can really help us, like actually make them feel part of not just watching the game and enjoying it, but promoting it as well. Because when you buy something new or you see something new, you always want people to love it as much as you do. You're like, oh, you've got to see this show, you've got to do this.
Yep.
A little bit the same with sport, make them sort of ambassadors of it, but in a really organic way. I was going to say authentic, but I banned that word from my agency because
It's banned.
I just hate it. Or authentic and disruptor should never be used. Oh, I don't know. They just we need to tell your brand story in a really authentic way.
You're like, no.
No,
it's the
and also
horror.
no
The
one wants to hear your brand story. They care about themselves. They always have. So make it about them.
Authenticity
And
speaks for itself.
Yeah,
That's how it works.
Yeah. It kind of just. Oh, you mean real? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Speaking about little interesting TV clips and what we've just been talking about, it reminded me of one where I saw you speaking about consistency versus something going viral.
Yeah.
And when talking about social media, do you mind speaking on
Yeah,
that?
sure. A one-off viral thing can be, great, really good for the ego of the brand and blah, blah, blah. But what happens with that, particularly if it's from your brand and you're pushing it out and it goes viral and the next thing doesn't, firstly, the algorithm gets really mad at you. So the algorithm rewards consistently good things. TikTok's the exception to that a little bit. TikTok it almost looks at the algorithm of each clip on its own, and it doesn't even look at followers. It looks at the clip and whether people like it straight away. And even if it's 3 or 4 people who really like it, it will push it out. Whereas the other platforms, it is about consistently good stuff. So I think sometimes people put out boring stuff thinking that's okay, we can just put out a boring thing now. But the algorithm makes it harder for the next thing you put out to reach people, and you have to pay more money because they're all about making money, of course. So consistency is the key. You're better off, except for TikTok, on keeping it on an even but good rather than up and down.
Change angles slightly. We've spoken a little bit about different sports along the way, examples from soccer. You spoke about Tennis Australia. When it comes to women's sport, do you have the sense that the rising tide lifts all boats from, or is some of the competition of AFLW other women's sports?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think there is probably a cohort of older women who are rising tides lifts all boats. We will support any sport because we're good feminists, blah, blah, blah. I think with the younger people, no, it's about the sport they love and the sport that they're playing. So, if they're playing AFL in, a team at school, they're probably more likely to follow that, which I like because it's then about the sport, not about the boobs.
Just to finish, the comparisons, you always hear these conversations about the NRLW and the job that they're doing in the NRL in terms of boosting their women's games, playing grand finals on the same day, taking the women's team to Vegas, although I know they're not doing that next year. What's your reading of their strategy and the AFL strategy? Because, it's a conversation so much that they do it better. Do you agree?
I don't think they do. I think the NRL is so desperate for families to go that they're using the females as kind of, look how good we are. And I could be a little bit biased because I live in Sydney now, and every week there's the stories that come out of the NRL. You're like, oh, God. But I don't know. I haven't really, honestly, seen much of the NRL women's stuff. So that's how little it is cut through for me, who lives in Sydney, compared to the AFLW, which I've seen a lot more of. So that, again, is a focus group of one, but I have genuinely seen very little from the NRL women's. I've seen more from union and definitely from soccer.
Soccer, yes. I would agree that soccer's
Yeah.
a bit of a juggernaut, and the Matildas have a lot to do with that. Dee, it's been very interesting. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
for your time.
Thank
the
you.
real Dee Madigan.
The real Dee Madigan.
That's me.
No authentic here.
No.
Just the real Dee Madigan. Thank you so much, Dee. We've enjoyed that chat. Everyone else, enjoy your footy on the weekend. We hope your team wins, and we'll see you Monday.